Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the emerging panic from the Tories as the calamity of last week's local election results sinks in. What will their analysis be showing them, and how worried should they be? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, the Culture Secretary was interviewed yesterday and was echoing Sunak's remarks from Friday that the government aren't actually going to do anything differently. She was saying, oh, we need to listen. Okay, you always say that. The voters are frustrated. Yep, that's evident. But this is a sign that we have to learn no lessons and carry on as before. All right, then. You go ahead and see if the same thing that gives you the same results next year then, because I think it's going to. So the Tories seem to be engaging in a bit of a knee-jerk reaction at the moment. It will be interesting to see what they do once they have had time for sensible strategy discussions, because you would think they'd need to start quite urgently, but it's going to take time to really, because all MPs at the moment have seen is the results, and they know that they're bad and they know that they're worse than expected, but they haven't presumably as yet had the analysts saying exactly what they mean. Because I think this bizarre reaction to no, we need to learn no lessons is because they haven't formulated their plan of action yet, because their intended plan of action may as well be thrown in the bin, because they suffered a worse than expected result. Not just a bad result. They knew it was going to be bad. Worse than expected. And because it's worse than expected, they have to accept that their intended follow-up is now suspect. For example, when their strategists do sit down to debrief top Tories, they're going to have to point out the punishing impact of tactical voting. Labour, the Lib Dems and the Greens have all benefited from clear tactical voting and in some cases unofficial cooperation between the parties in quite a few councils. And this is anti-Tory tactical voting. It's quite funny. I had a comment from someone saying, oh, you don't seem to be taking into account all these people voting Labour aren't really voting Labour. They just voted against the Conservatives. Like, no, I frequently make this point. The vast majority of people who vote for Labour, who vote for the Conservatives, who even vote for the SNP, are not voting for those parties. They're voting against the alternative because, especially in a first past the post system, as I constantly say, ought to be one of my catchphrases, you do not vote for what you want, you vote for what you least oppose, because there are only, usually in most cases, two credible choices that you have. Sometimes there's three, but mostly you've got two credible choices. Which one do you least oppose? Because you may oppose both to some degree. Which one is the better option? That's what you do. That's what most voters do. That is why if first past the post was replaced with PR, which is what I would want, I am fully aware that the major parties would all lose vote share. That's fine, because at least people would be able to use their vote for what they want, and what they don't want most of the time is a Tory government. So that works out well for me, even as a Labour supporter. But yeah, this is anti-Tory tactical voting, and it's a very tough one for the Tories, because the thing about tactical voting is that the people who want to engage in it will be able to easily find out if their constituency is particularly suitable. For the local elections, it's actually sometimes quite tricky knowing how to use your vote tactically. Hence the Stop the Tories website that came out ahead of these elections and will be there for the general election next year. But actually for a general election, it's actually really quite easy. It's very easy to find out where you put your tactical vote. And it's not just, by the way, on whoever came second to the Tories last time. That's not always it. But it is easy to find out. And if it is, if people were voting tactically for the local elections to send a national message, they're going to be out in force next year. There are a lot of marginal Tory constituencies around the country, a lot of them, because the way the Tories won in 2019, their large majority, they didn't pile on loads of extra votes under Boris Johnson. It's hardly any. They just won a lot of seats by a small margin. It's how you do it. And now there's quite a few more have been made marginal due to the utter shambles of the Tories since the last election. Because what these results also show is that Rishi Sunak has been annoying everyone. He's been annoying the newly found voters in the red wall, but he's also been annoying the stalwarts in the blue wall. And if people engage in tactical voting for local elections in order to make a national statement, yeah, they're going to for the national elections. That's what they're building up to. One of the Tories' main strengths is that their opponents split votes amongst themselves, leaving the Conservatives, who are not inherently popular, cleaning up in most elections. Tactical voting significantly reduces this advantage. Besides, double trouble next year because Reform UK threaten to split their vote. The Tory strategists will absolutely be explaining all this to the Prime Minister. And there'll be more as well. Despite the best narrative playing out in the media, the Tory strategists will be frank with Sunak and his team. All this talk of vote share, whether using sensible methods or not, is not really the point in a first-past-the-post system. What matters is how those votes are distributed. Who gets the most votes in a seat-by-seat basis? Doesn't matter that Labour's vote share may not be as high as in 1997, if the Tory vote share is even worse, although at the moment there is no evidence that the vote share will not be as high as in 97 or even higher. Also, part of the equation is how efficiently parties are focusing their vote gains. See, if they're using resources efficiently to get the vote increases in the seats that matter and not wasting time on those which don't, you win more seats with a smaller share. In 2005, absolutely classic case. I say classic, didn't happen very often, but it's a classic case of this. 2005, Labour won 35% of the popular vote, but they still won 355 seats. Now, for reference, the Conservatives currently have pretty much the same. They have 354 seats. So 35% of the vote won them a very nice majority. In fact, more than that, just to emphasise how vote sharing itself doesn't give you the full picture, the Tories are trying to claim at the moment that the vote share calculation from the local elections puts Labour on about 36% with a 9-point lead over the Tories. This is hung parliament. Oh yeah. In 2005, Labour won a hefty majority with 35% of the vote and a 3-point lead over the Conservatives. The Tories retreating into vote share and ignoring other factors is high-grade copium. It's what they're doing to calm their panicking nerves. Not that winning a good majority with 35% of the vote is anything to boast about, more reason to go for proportional representation. But the point is that it's not vote share on its own that wins you election, but how well you can focus these votes in the right areas. Labour are currently laser focused on their target areas and their target voters, and the Tories know that. Also, the Tories may be trying to focus on target areas, but they're absolutely not focusing on their target voters, and they know that as well, because at the moment they are still having to pursue policies for the sake of the far right. They know they're moving away from their voters. Combine this with an almost certain increase in tactical voting next year, and never mind what the media is saying, the Tories behind closed doors will be being told that they are up shit creek. So now they're panicking. But they seem to be going with their intended plan until the strategists give them a new one, which is to try and recapture that spirit of 2015 with their Coalition of Chaos line. That's the one that's coming out now, the Coalition of Chaos. Oh yeah, the anti-growth coalition. Yeah, that's no longer the phrase used to attack Labour, because that was Liz Truss's line and no sensible Tory wants to remind people about her. So they're going for the Coalition of Chaos. It's a reference to Labour, the Lib Dems and the SNP. They're pushing this line that the local election results indicate that Labour can form a government, but only a minority government. In reality, as I say, this is nonsense. Anything can change between now and the election, but the state of play right now is that Labour would win a majority in a general election. But perception is what matters in politics. In 2015, the Tories made great use of the argument that Labour were not on course for an outright majority, so if you vote for Labour, what you're actually voting for is a coalition with the SNP. And this worked on English voters who fell for the Tory line about this leading to the breakup of the UK. Of course, 8 years on, and that chaos with Ed Miliband is looking pretty good, if you ask me. It's only 8 years. My goodness, what's happened in 8 years? But it worked. I'm not saying it was the entire factor for the 2015 results. There are other things as well, but it certainly helped the Tories out. So now they're trying the same thing again. In a hung parliament, Labour would, of course, need either the Lib Dems or the SNP, or both, to at least support their government, even if not their legislation. The Tories are describing this as a coalition of chaos, harking back to 2015. Only, can't work this time. As political analyst Sam Friedman pointed out, there's nothing remotely chaotic about the personalities of Keir Starmer, Ed Davey or Humza Yousaf. They're actually very sober characters, aren't they? You can't really go, oh, they're very chaotic, aren't they? But no. Doesn't matter what you think about them. What you cannot do is describe them as chaotic. In addition, the Conservatives have been extremely chaotic in recent years. David Cameron got away with the idea of a stable Conservative government as opposed to the chaotic Labour government because he had been stable in coalition with the Lib Dems, and Ed Miliband had a bit of trouble with the Bacon-Sarney. But the tables are turned now. People are not only sick of the Tories after what will be 14 years, not just 5, but Sunak can no more claim to be leading a stable government than he can convince people that Starmer's government would be chaotic. All Starmer has to do is leave the sandwiches alone, stick to the curries, and he should be good. And the entire trick works on the basis of getting through to people this notion of Labour being on for a minority government, saying that they can't actually win an outright majority, despite current polling saying otherwise. They're relying on this pseudo poll nonsense extrapolation from the local election results that most people will miss because the coronation has drowned out all the political news, just as the Tories intended when they set the date for it. Another knee-jerk reaction I've seen is to say, oh, well, in 1991 the Tories lost 1,000 councillors, just as they did last week, and then they went on to win the general election the following year in 92. Yeah, but in 1991 the Tories had 9,000 councillors. So losing 1,000 wasn't nearly as bad as last week when they started off with a third of that number. They had just over 3,000 councillors and lost 1,000. But in general terms, these attempts to mislead by right-wing commentators and get hooked on the copium, it's all very interesting. Their purpose is, of course, quite clear. It's to browbeat the public into thinking the Conservatives are not in as bad a position as you might think, and that Labour are not on for a majority, that the best people can hope for if they want to change a government is a minority Labour government. That is their aim. But what if it also has the effect of fooling Tory MPs? What if Tory MPs look at it with uncritical eyes and think, actually, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe we just need to hold firm and not rock the boat. That will mean continuing with the insane policies of the far right, which continue to frustrate moderate voters. Disaster for them. The main saving grace, I think, for the Conservatives, if I had to pick out anything that is some actual good news for them, it is that their local election campaign was a complete shambles. And you may think, well, that's an odd benefit, Phil. That's a funny thing to do to cheer them up. But actually, it is. If the Tories had run a technically competent campaign and still suffered this scale of defeat, I would definitely be all over. But the fact that their campaign was embarrassingly bad actually gives them some hope. They were focusing on all the wrong issues. They didn't get... Their top team weren't out and about. Their big names were not out and about campaigning. They were nowhere to be seen. Rishi Sunak got out a little bit, not much. Greg Hans went out with his joke. That was it. Boris Johnson went out drunk on the last day, and even then just recorded something from his car. We don't actually know he did any actual campaigning. You know, as I've said in recent days, very few big names in the Tory party were out. I mean, that's... straight away, that's not a campaign. That doesn't show you serious. And the fact they were focusing on all the wrong issues. Oh, potholes. Yeah, okay, good. Holes in the road. What about the holes in my pocket? Oh, well, we don't want to talk about that. You know, and when they did go out, as I say, it was embarrassing. Complete shit show. But come the general election, it's not Greg Hans running the show. It's Isaac Leverdow. An actual campaign strategist. Professional. Knows what he's doing. Yes, he'll have his work cut out next year, but the Conservatives will be running a technically competent campaign. They'll be paying enough for it. Don't worry, it'll be dirty as hell as well, just like last time when he ran it. But he will have Tory MPs on message and on the right message. He'll have the campaign clearly targeted, and he'll get the right people out to hit the streets in the right areas. Not sure who those people are going to be, because like I say, Boris Johnson can't be asked to save any seat but his own, and the cabinet are almost all either useless or lack the fame to be of much help. But the campaign will at least be well run behind the scenes, even if it does end up resembling an attempt to herd cats. So unfortunately, we were denied the same quality of opposition in the Tories as we'll get next year. We were denied the full dress rehearsal, you may say. Because it turns out Greg Hans waving that Christmas cracker joke around wasn't quite the genius strategy he thought it was. Mind you, he's still doing it. I'm not sure someone's really had a word with him about it yet. Didn't work, Greg, mate. It didn't work. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.